Hello, welcome back. I don't know if it's Thursday or not. So this is kind of a part 2 on shaping, but it's also way more specifically about how I do things. So I have developed my way of designing as almost a way of speed designing. For a while there, I was having to put out a new pattern every single week, which means that normally I would have less than a day to go from concept through to finished thing. So this video was a lot harder to put together than the first one, just because I had to find ways to try and explain things that I do kind of instinctively in a way that I feel like you guys might be able to replicate. So wish us both luck. We'll see how I did. Okay, I have to do it. I have to talk about slope. Please don't fear the geometry. It'll be over really, really fast. Basically, this section is just for people who need to understand why something works, and for the rest of you, you can just keep defaulting to 6 for flat, 3 for slope. So slope is the angle of your shape as it gets wider and narrower. Think of slope as being everything from flat all the way through to sticking straight up in the air. We can control the angle that we use using the number of increases or decreases. This is what the angle of increase, otherwise known as slope, looks like on a little chart. We have the 0 increases and decreases line pointing straight upwards, and that's basically because if we don't use increases or decreases, our work continues on in a straight line. And then along the x-axis, which just means this axis pointing to the right, we have 6 increases. It's because if we put 6 increases in our round, our work will expand out wider but not taller. So those two lines should make a lot of sense. Now, in between those two lines, we have a bunch of little splits, each one representing one additional increase. Now, technically each one of those increases represents 15 degrees, but it's really not as specific as that, so just try not to worry about that too much. So decreases work the same way and can be visually represented on the other side of our chart. Though keep in mind that this isn't right and left, this is the outside of our work and this is the inside of our work. So in practice, it's really not as literal as this, just because you very rarely want the same angle applied the whole way around your work. But I wanted to include it here just because I thought it might help some of you visualize what exactly increases and decreases are doing. Anyway, maths lesson over. So in previous videos, we have covered breaking our sketch into parts and then those parts into rounds. If you need a refresher on either of those, I am going to refer you back to the Ultimate Beginner Guide because I won't be covering it again here today. There is actually another level of breakdown you can do, and that is breaking each row down into sections. So this is probably the most complex thing for me to try and explain, just because this is my own internal thought process that helps me keep track of which bit it goes where and how to shape different parts of the same round doing different things at the same time. And I have no idea if this is how other designers do it or not. So by carving up your row into sections, you can work out what each part specifically is supposed to be doing, rather than having to focus on the whole shape at the same time. Now, I can pretty much open up to any page in any of my notebooks, and you'll see these little hieroglyphs everywhere. They are actually little charts of various sections, helping me shape my round and keep track of various design features going on. Sometimes they look like this, showing every stitch in the round, and sometimes they look more like this, which just shows the spacing of different features. So today I'm going to be showing you how to design these two shapes, more so that you can see what my process looks like in action, and maybe it'll help you build your own more advanced designs. Now, I have already selected the one piece from each that we're going to be focusing on, and I've broken it down into rows. So before we really sink our teeth in here, I do just want to reiterate something that I mentioned at the end of the last video, and that is that trial and error is a perfectly legitimate course of action when it comes to designing. You're supposed to try things to see what works, and go back and change them if they're not working. Everybody frogs. The only important thing to add here is that make sure you know why you need to frog before you do it. What are you going to do differently next time? Practical example number 1 is an arch. Now, why an arch? First of all, I really like worms and caterpillars, and this shape kind of lends itself to being either. Second of all, I do think they have that little bit of a wow factor, but they are surprisingly easy. And once you can make an arch, you can pretty much make any curved shape that you want. So moving right along. As we move through the next section, there'll be a couple of different things on the screen. So first off, there'll be the sketch of what we're making and a highlight of the row we're going to be working on next down here. Then in the top corner, I'm going to show my row breakdown and how I work sections and work out where each of the stitches is supposed to go. And then on top, there is going to be what the final row looks like, as well as the row before it, just so that we can keep track of what's going on. Ready? Let's go. So because my arch is going to be round, I'm going to start with a magic ring of 6. I would encourage you to use this as your default way to start a shape, and only start differently if there is a real reason to. I want my tube to be 12 stitches around, so this is another easy row. I want it to be wide in all directions, so I evenly space 6 increases around, which is actually just 6 increases for the row. Now we can look at our row breakdown on the grid. I can see that the walls of my shape are continuing straight and that that's going to continue for 3 full rows. Single crochet creates height but no width, meaning it forms straight lines. So I'm going to work 3 rows of 12 single crochet to build up our nub. There are no relevant sections to our rows yet, as we're doing the same thing the whole way around. Still, you can depict this as shown in the top right, as a ring made up of 12 circles, each depicting a single stitch. In our next row, we are starting our curve. So if you look closely at our grid, you'll see that we have the top side sloping upwards and the bottom side staying straight. All the shaping takes place on top and bottom, not the sides. So it's time for sections. I draw my round using my preferred notation of a circle for each stitch in the round. I make a note of where my starting point is, which makes no difference right now, but will be a good reference point as we work through the whole shape. I split my round into a top and a bottom, both with an equal number of stitches. The bottom half is going straight, so we know those stitches will all be single crochet, and you can fill that out in your row. The top half is going to slope about halfway between going straight or going flat, so I'm going to use 3 increases. I'm going to cluster those increases in the middle of my top section as I want this to curve in just one dimension. If we evenly space them throughout the top section, we would be curving out slightly to the sides as well. So we have our row instructions, but we can simplify them down. And now we are ready to crochet row 6. In the next row, we are once again sloping the top side only and keeping the underside straight. I draw my round again, marking my starting point, and then I can add notation to the inside of the round showing what happened in the previous round. In this case, I just want to mark where the increases were last round, and I do it like this. I also mark my sections, and you'll notice that even though our top has gained 3 stitches, it hasn't moved the boundary of our section. The bottom is going straight, so it's all single crochet. The top is doing the same thing as it was last row, so we do the same thing we did last row, positioning 3 increases in the center of the section. Then fill in the rest of your row instructions. Once again, we're going to simplify those down, and then stitch. Now, row 8 might seem harder, but don't let it trick you. It wants the bottom and the top to both slope upwards. Just draw your round, add in your starting point and the stitch history notation, and split it into sections. Now we can just tackle one section at a time. So the top half is more familiar to us this time, so we'll start there. It's doing the same thing as the previous 2 rounds, so we just need to center 3 increases in the top section. And they fit nicely with 4 single crochet on one side and 5 single crochet on the other. Next, we're going to look at the bottom section. It's sloping towards the inside of the work, which means we make that slope with decreases. We want it to have the same slope as the top, so we know it's 3 decreases. Each one of them take up 2 stitches, so it isn't so much centering them as cramming them in. So there is my final row, and we're going to stitch it. In the next 2 rows, we have the bottom continuing to slope up and the top continuing straight. We draw our round, mark our starting point, add our stitch history. Note that we have a new marking this time that shows where our decreases were. The time has come to redefine our sections. Theory is fine, but we are working with a physical medium, and we've made significant changes at this point to both sections, leaving us with 2 uneven chunks that we are aiming to keep balanced in order to maintain our shape. So we have 18 stitches in our round. I want to reclassify 9 stitches as the top and 9 stitches as the bottom. I also know we need to keep the increase cluster at the center of our top and the decrease cluster at the center of our bottom. I'm going to start with the bottom because it's easier. Count 3 stitches on either side of our decrease cluster, and those 9 stitches make up our new bottom section. The other 9 stitches will make up our top, and you should see the increases are roughly in the middle of it. You should note our starting point is no longer falling in the middle of those 2 sections and is now firmly in the bottom section. Finally bringing us to round 9. We want 3 decreases in the middle of our bottom side. Knowing we can't have a decrease overlapping our starting point actually makes this positioning easier. We put a decrease as our first stitch and then 2 decreases as our last 2 stitches. Then position the remaining 3 single crochet of the bottom section. The top is then staying straight, so we put a single crochet into each stitch. Once again, simplify your notation and then stitch it. So row 10 is the exact same process, just slightly fewer stitches in your round. Draw your sections, simplify your row, and then stitch it. Congratulations, we've reached the save point in the middle of our shape. Everything goes straight for 2 whole rows, and you should enjoy them. I'm also going to use this moment to stuff up to where we are. So one thing you might notice about this shape is that it's a mirror image of itself. Not only does using symmetricality a word? Not only does using symmetry like this in your designs make things look more intentional, but it actually halves your shaping workload. We've already done the work to work out how to get the angle and shape we want. We just need to work the same rows in reverse order, swapping increases and decreases around to get the same shape, but mirrored. That means row 13 is actually just a mirrored row 10. We take the exact row and swap the decreases for increases. Now, you will occasionally need to check the rotation. I feel like I need to here because if I worked a mirrored row 10 exactly, my increases would line up off to one side, which means that's the way my arch would curve, and I don't want that. It's because I work in a continuous spiral, so I need to adjust by 1 to 2 stitches every 2 to 3 rows. And with sections, that's actually pretty easy. We know exactly the order of our stitches, we just need to work out where our new starting point actually is. We know that we need our increases to fall here on our round, which moves our starting point 2 stitches backwards. You will need to keep this new rotation in mind for all subsequent rows. So row 14 is the mirror of row 9, so all we need to do is draw our section, swap our decreases to increases, and adjust for our new starting point. And we do the same thing for the next 3 rows, each time checking our rotation just to make sure it's still lining up. Finally, we arrive back to the start, where we have this small straight section of 3 rows of single crochet. Last but not least, we have a row to close our opening. And there is our finished worm/caterpillar. It's not as precise as the one in the original sketch, but it's definitely a good starting point. And it's a very cute little worm. Now, it's the little things that really sell the concept, so I'm going to add a couple of eyes. And I had to make him a buddy, because the fun thing about this shape is that it works from a couple of different angles. So for our second example, we're going to be making something a little bit closer to a shape you might be trying to make in your next pattern. It's a combined head and body piece, in this case for our bunny. So once again, I'm going to use my default start of a magic ring of 6 single crochet. It's not broken and I'm not fixing it. Looking at our grid, we can see the next 2 rows are being used to grow our flat base wider but not taller. So for row 2, that means an increase into every stitch as there are only 6 stitches available. For row 3, we have 12 stitches to work with. We still want it wider and not taller, and thinking about my bunny, I do want this to be round. That means I'm going to evenly space 6 increases around. I can simplify that row down, and most of you will probably recognise it in this format. For row 4, we can see that we have both sides of our piece sloping outwards at the same angle. I don't want this to just be a ball, and I want my bunny to have quite pronounced cheeks that take up a lot of the face, so this row is where I'm going to start that. Drawing my round just as we did for the worm, I have 18 stitches to work with. Up until now, we have been working the same pattern the whole way around, so I'm not going to mark my starting point yet. It will make more sense to insert it where it will make my shaping easiest, so we'll do that once we've worked out what this row actually looks like. The stitch history isn't particularly relevant to this round, as we have no previous design features to track, but you can mark it in if you find it helpful. Then I need to divide this into 4 sections: cheek, face, cheek, and back of the head. These will not be even sections, and I'm going to use a little framework sketch to help me out. I'm going to loosely split my round in half to help me position things. I want the cheeks to sit on the front of the head, and they will be the only dominant feature. It will take some trial and error at first to get a feel for how many increases to use for this sort of thing, but today I'm going to use 3 increases for each cheek, so they'll take up 3 stitches each. That leaves me with 12 stitches remaining that aren't allocated to a section. Now I could put 6 at the back and 6 at the front, but to me that will push my cheeks to the side of the head when I want them very much on the face. For today, I think 4 stitches wide is a good number for the face, leaving 8 stitches for the back of the head. So with that framework done, I can now apply the sections to my main chart. I split off 8 sections for the back, 3 for each cheek, leaving 4 in the middle for the face. Each cheek is going to have 3 increases, but the rest will all be single crochet. So now we know what stitches we want to do in the round, we need to pick a starting point. Allow me to share my experience. If the opportunity presents itself, you want your starting point to be as far from any shaping detail as possible. Too many times I've gotten halfway through a design to realize I need to stick a decrease over the top of my starting point. Today, that furthest point is in the middle of the back of the head. We can now write up our round and stitch it. With our cheek shape instantiated, I can see from the grid that we are just trying to add height, so I'm going to work 3 rows of 24 single crochet around. In row 8, we can see both sides are sloping in at the same angle. Again, the grid isn't showing us everything, just one side. I know the shape I want, and that row is about adding definition to the bottom of the cheeks. Sloping towards the inside of the work means we need decreases to do it. Now, I'm going to mirror row 4 for this. It already has the spacing and angle that I want, and I'll just swap the increases for decreases and it's perfect. To go the long way around, draw your stitches, mark your starting point and split it into sections, remembering that the cheeks should now be at 6 stitches, not 3. Today, I'm going to mark the stitch history from row 4. Every row since has just been single crochet, so it's more helpful to us to see the row where we did some actual shaping. You just start at the starting point and work your way through the row instructions on the inside of your chart. So now we know we want to decrease everywhere we increased, so we can mark that. And we're going to look at our actual work to make sure that it's still going to fall in roughly the same place and it hasn't twisted too much. The rest of the stitches are just single crochet. So written out, we have 4 single crochet, 3 decreases, 4 single crochet, 3 decreases, and then 4 single crochet, which is exactly the same as what row 4 would be if we mirrored it. And now we stitch it. So row 9 on the grid is showing that I want more definition between the head and the body. I want it to pull in quite significantly. There is more than one way to do this, for example using multiple decreases to cinch it in. But anyone who has seen my videos before will know I have my own favourite way, and that is by using a single crochet 3 together. It's basically just a decrease that you work over 3 stitches instead of 2, and it forms a much sharper pinch point in your stitches, allowing what came before to balloon over the top a little bit. It's great for creating definition for jawlines and in this case, cheeks. I've drawn my sections here and there are 2 candidates for where I can add this definition. First, I could apply it to the face, which would define the chin. Second, I could apply it to the cheeks to really round them out and close them off before we head into the body. For today, I want it to be the cheeks, but in your own designing there is no wrong answer. Try both, see which one looks like your design more. For the next 2 rows, I can see we want to flare back out into the body. Thinking about my bunny, I need to make the decision of if I want it to flare the whole way around, which will have the back sloping outwards too, or if I just want to build up the front and sides. So when in doubt, refer back to your reference sketch. I can see that I've kept the back pretty straight. So now we have new sections to define our round with: back, side, front, side. We want to add width and height to our piece, not just width, so I know I need between 1 and 5 increases. If I apply just 1 increase, it won't really have an impact on the shape. 2 increases will only add width to either the sides or the front, not both. If I apply 3 increases, my body will take on a slightly triangular shape, which isn't quite right for what I'm trying to do today. If I was flaring out the back as well, I'd be inclined to go with 5 increases, as it allows for 2 in the front, 1 for each side, and then 1 in the centre back. So this leaves me with 4 increases, and it'll give my bunny a loosely rectangular shape. My plan is to position 2 of them in the front, and then 1 on each side, leaving the back straight. I've drawn my stitches and marked where my cheeks are, which define the front of my bunny. We have 14 stitches to work with, 4 of which have previously been considered the front or face. If I want a pair of increases on the front of the bunny, my choices are to put them directly next to each other, which will cause a more defined corner there, or put them on the outer stitches of the front 4, leaving a 2-stitch gap between them, allowing it to be a more gentle slope. So that's 2 down, 2 to go. I want these to be on the true sides of the bunny, not necessarily below the cheeks. I'm also a big fan of evenly spacing things like this, so my immediate inclination is to put a 2-stitch gap on either side of the front, and then put the increases in. This does push the side increases slightly towards the back, but with only 14 stitches to work with, I think it's our best bet. I can always frog it later if it doesn't work. So row 11 is working towards the same goal as row 10. Mapping that out, I'm going to insert another 4 increases. Now, I like to make my stitches mirror in the row. It tickles my brain, but it also comes down to symmetry, making your design look intentional. Because of that, I'm going to place the increases on one side of our bunny in the second stitch of each increase, and the increases on the other side of our bunny in the first stitch of each increase, all with single crochet in between. This is a preference thing, but if I'm telling you my thought process, you need to hear the quirks as well. By now, I'm aware that our spiral will have shifted, so I'm paying extra attention to where my stitches are falling. It still seems fine at this point, but next shaping row we will probably have to adjust for it. The next 2 rows are just straight, so we're going to add 2 rows of 22 single crochet around. We're nearing the end of the bunny now, so I would start considering stuffing or inserting eyes if that's part of your plan. In row 14, we are aiming to start closing off the base of our bunny, with both sides angling in. I'm once again going to lean on the work I've done previously and simply mirror row 11. So we know our stitch order, but looking at where those stitches would fall on their own, I know I finally need to adjust for the spiral by moving our starting point. I identify where the front of my bunny is supposed to be, and work out where those centered 2 stitches are. From there, I can count backwards, not forgetting that it's 2 stitches for a decrease, and work out that I need to move my starting point in the row by 2 stitches. And then it's just a matter of stitching. So the grid is indicating that we have reached the end of our bunny and we are just trying to close off flat. That usually calls for 6 evenly spaced decreases, and we just so happen to be back at an 18 stitch count, so we can just use our standard decreasing rows. While I didn't do that on purpose, I have to acknowledge that years of experience has ingrained several habits in me fairly deeply, one of which is to keep to / get back to a multiple of 6 wherever possible. So there is our bunny body. It's a bit of a peg, but you can see the extra shaping we did, particularly from the side view. I am going to take a moment to whip up some ears, paws, a little puffy tail, and some feet. These little bits are the world's most basic tubes, but they really do bring it all together. I like to think that this helped shed a little bit of light on how I do my shaping, and hopefully there was one or two usable tidbits in there for you as well. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave it for today. There are obviously a lot of other elements and tools that you can use to shape things. You've got post stitching, you've got chaining across your round to split it into 2 or 3 different parts, you've got joining things in the round, and just so many others. But I kind of didn't want to go too broad or too fast with this. Really increases and decreases. Once you have a proper handle on what they can and can't do, you should actually be able to make most shapes without any of the fancy tricks and nonsense that I tend to put through a lot of my patterns. But anyway, if you want a part 3 that goes into some of those other techniques, all you have to do is let me know in the comments, hit the like button, and I will see where we can fit it into the schedule. Okay, bye!